Okay, so now that we have a basic physics object that moves around that we can control and jump with, let's try to figure out how we can build a very simple um, reward for the player to kind of achieve. So for instance, in platformers, you may have something like coins or some sort of object that the user needs to collect that increases their score. So to do that, let's just make a simple object. I'm going to right click and actually I'm going to go to game object. I'm going to create a sphere, let's say, and I'm going to put it somewhere for now. It doesn't really matter, but let's just put it arbitrarily here. And I want to make it to look like a coin. So I'm going to go and I'm going to change the shape of this thing. So let's squeeze it a little bit. Okay, so we have now something that kind of looks like a coin. We can obviously texture it as well, so we can add, so I'm going to do some other things like structuring. So I'm going to make a folder called materials, and we already have our platform material inside of this. We can also create another material that we can call it coin material, for instance. And then we want it to be kind of gold looking. So let's just pick an arbitrary color and see if that looks okay. Yeah, it looks okay. So now we have our coin, or the appearance of a coin. And it looks like it's not perfectly rotated, so let's fix that. Okay, I think this should be okay. All right, so now we can kind of populate these coins. Actually, what we can do before we do that is let's create a prefab. As I've shown you before, the prefab allows you to capture all the information about this object that you can then reuse. So I want to have multiple coins in my map. So one thing I can do is I can create a prefab of the coin, create a folder called prefabs. I'll put my platform in there, I'll put my coin in there. And now I can create a couple more of these coins, and we can kind of put them anywhere, it doesn't really matter. And one thing I realized is that these platforms are maybe too close together, so maybe we'll move them a little bit. Maybe put the player here. I want to give a little bit of gap so that the player has a little bit of a challenge. Something like so. And we can create another, let's say another coin. Oops. That we can also place on the map. Cool, so we have a bunch of coins now. Now, if the player were to, oh, actually, player's syncing in. But if the player were to, for instance, if I start this now, and I make my way across to, oops, oh, I fell down. Okay, let's try that again. So let's say I made my way to the coin. You'll see that I'm just landing on top of it because it has its own collider. I'm not able to collect the coin, and there's no reward from actually, touching the coin. So what we need to do is we need to detect the collision between my player and the coin. And once we do that, we should be able to reward the player once they've hit the coin. So to do this, we can write a new script. So I actually also made a scripts folder, so I'm going to move some of the stuff inside. It's always good to be organized because as you start building out complex projects, you're going to see a lot of stuff and you want to kind of keep it clean. Okay, so let's call it coin hit, for instance. And right now it's going to be a very simple script. All we're really doing here is we want to detect the collision between the player and the coin. So I'm just going to pull up the onCollision API. So the collider, so essentially what's happening is that the coin has a sphere collider, and we can look at what that looks like. It's kind of large right now. We actually should also change the way that that looks, but For now, we'll leave it. Essentially, what we want to do is we want to detect if the player's collider is in contact with this sphere, and if so, we know that the collision has occurred, and we want to reward the player with the coin. So if we go back to our character, you can see that they also have a collider, which you can edit, and their collider, it looks like a capsule. So one simple and useful API that Unity provides is things to do with the collider. So one of them is called collider.onCollisionEnter. So this allows you to determine when a collision occurs and to actually do something based on the collision. So here, when my player's collider collides with the coin collider, this function or this event is triggered, and then I can do something inside this event. So inside of this coin hit, I can create a instance of this onCollisionEnter, and I'm gonna call it collision just for simplicity. So now, when a collision occurs, so let's say a specific coin collides with a specific, or with the character or the player, we enter this. So now we need to figure out what type of collision it is. Because for instance, sometimes if the coin is on the ground, and you may have a collision with the ground and the player, but we only care about the collision with the player because that's what triggers our point, right? The player has to hit the coin. The coin can't just hit the ground in order to, for something to happen. So what we need to do is we need to use this collision information. So the collision information contains a lot of different things. It includes things like what the rigid body of the collider is, or the collision is. So in this case, I could, in theory, get the collision transform of my character if it collides with my coin. But what I need here is the collider itself. And I want to get the name or the tag of the object. So there's many ways in which you can get references to the character. One simple way is actually just to use tags. So if you go to the player or the player game object, you'll see there's a section called tag. You can create your own tags or just use something that already exists. And you can basically tag your character as the player. And so what we can do is, if our collision.collider.tag equals the player, that's the only time we really care, right? We only care if the coin collides with the player, so that's what we do here. And now we can do some sort of behavior based on this. For instance, I can say, let's destroy the coin, or let's get rid of the coin because the player has picked that coin up. And so I can just say destroy the game object. And we don't really need the update here, or really the start at this point. So we really just need the collision. Okay, so now we can go to our prefab, which we created before, and we can add this script back in. Let's go back to our prefab, go to the coin, let's add the component. It's called coin hit. So I've added that in. Now let's try this. So I'm gonna try to, oops, okay, I fell, that was bad. So as you can see, I've hit the coin and I pick up the coin disappears because the object itself gets destroyed when I collide with it. And obviously we'd want to do something based on this. So in this case, we'd want to reward the player with an extra point or something like that, which we'll do later on. But as you can see, I have swallowed up all the coins through this collision enter